All right, so guys, welcome to Zippori. And the word Zippori is from the word Zippor, which means a bird. And it's believed that this site was called Zippora because, like a bird perched up on a nest, Zippora is actually, and you'll see around, it's perched up on like a hill, and you can see all around you, okay? Now, that interpretation comes from Josephus Flavius, who writes about it. And 2,000 years ago, believe it or not, in the days of Jesus, this was the capital of the Galilee. Now, not many Christians have heard of it because it's not in the New Testament. But this was, and you can tell by the size, this was the capital. This was the main city. One of the three main villages and cities, towns, along with, what are the other two? Nazareth and Cana. Okay? Now, why it's not in the New Testament, that's a mystery. Why? This is the theory. Now, I used to teach that Jesus came here. This was the place of his workshop where he probably brought new tools. He came for stones, but I don't believe that anymore. And I believe the reason why Zippori is not mentioned in the New Testament is because I believe Jesus would not have come to Zippori. Why? Because like a number of cities and towns and villages of the day, there were some cities that were Roman, there were some cities that were fully Jewish, but then there were other cities that were a mixture. And among the mixtured cities, Jesus didn't go in. Let me give you two examples. One city that he didn't go into was Caesarea Philippi. If you read Matthew 16, it says he came to the borders or the region or the outskirts, some translations say, of Caesarea Philippi. That's what it says, number one. Number two, Tiberias was also a mixed city, Jewish and Roman, but it never mentions once Jesus going. In fact, many of these cities, it says, when Jesus came and did his teaching, it says the people went out to him. And the Greek and the Aramaic is very strong. They went out to him. He didn't go into those cities. So this is very important to understand that it was a very Jewish city, but it was mixed. And this was the problem. This was the problem of the day among some of the Jewish sects. They did not like some of the Jewish people mixing among the Greco-Roman world. Okay? And we know that a lot of the Jews of the day, they adopted Greek names. Josephus, his real name was Yosef ben Mattatyahu, but he took upon a Greek name, Flavius Josephus. And the Sadducees especially, they were the ones who really adopted the Greco-Roman culture. So again, putting it into its cultural context, it's really important to know. This was the center of the day. This was the capital of the day. This is a huge market area of the day. This was a residential area of the day. This is where people would come. Carpenters would come. This is where stonemasons would come. This would be the main marketplace of the area, along with Magdala. Have you been to Magdala yet? Okay, because that was also a major marketplace, along with it being a port place, and along with it being on the Via Maris, and through the Valley of the Doves at the bottom of Mount Arbel, where Jesus would have come from Nazareth through to the east. So that also was a major location, but this was the major city called Zippori, like a bird, Zippor, up on a perch. By the way, the name of Moses' wife was called Zippora, and that literally means a bird. So apart from that history, we really don't have a lot of writing about Zippora. We know that Josephus writes a little bit about it, that it snowed up here in the winter. number one. Number two, in the first great revolt in AD 66, when the Zealots broke out against the Romans, the Jews here did not fight against the Romans. And because of that, they were spared. So it was a liberal left-wing, city. And so but they were spared. And even though at heart I'm a right-wing nationalist, the Zealots were the extreme right-wing nationalists. Okay. Number two key history about Zippori was the rabbinic Judaism. When that first great Jewish revolt broke out in 66 AD, it lasted 4 years until the temple was destroyed in AD 70. A little bit later, in the year 135 AD, the Roman Emperor Hadrian, who crushed the second revolt, he then expelled the Jews from Jerusalem. So the Jewish leaders were facing a major crisis. No temple, no sacrifice for sins, no priesthood, because the documents of the priests were all burned when the Romans burned and destroyed the temple. And now they've got no holy city. So up until that day, the temple was the major central focus for the Jewish people. But now there is no more focus. And now they're out of Jerusalem. What do? So they move from place to a place called Yavna. Then from Yavna, they moved to Zippori. And this, in the year 200 AD, this is where a famous commentary called the Talmud, the Mishnah, was codified by a very famous rabbi called Yehuda Hanasi, Judah the Prince. And these are the Jewish commentaries, along with the Bible, that the Jewish sages read and follow. But you need to know, this was the real seat of authority to the Sanhedrin and to the Jewish leaders for a long time. Okay, so this is where what I would call, or what historians call, rabbinic Judaism. These are the really early foundation roots of rabbinic Judaism. And then it finally ended up in Tiberias. Okay, that became the real centrality of the rabbis. That's why Tiberias is one of the 4 holy cities, historical holy cities, along with Hebron, Jerusalem, Tzfat, and Tiberias, because that's where they ended up settling. But this was a major step in the development of rabbinic Judaism. What is rabbinic Judaism? Basically, it's where the rabbis take the place of the priests, where the synagogues take the place of the temple, and where prayer and good works takes the place of sacrifice for sins. And that is basically mainstream Judaism until today.